Hey everyone, it's Lacy Branch, event stylist and coordinator in St. Louis, Missouri. Thanks so much for tuning in for this installment of our video blog. Today we're going to be discussing the B word, also known as the budget. And this particular topic always comes with a little bit of hesitation on all sides, both on our client side, on our vendor side, and just all around awkwardness when talking about money. So hopefully in the next few minutes, we can kind of touch on, some tips and some advice that we can give you in your planning or in your fiance's planning or whoever. So we'll just kind of jump right in. So one of the things that we always tell people, and it seems like it should be understood, but not always, so is set a realistic budget. And what we mean by realistic is do not go by anyone else's budget. Not your cousin, not your mom's wedding, not your friend on the street, not a wedding that you were in, because all of those weddings, depending upon where they were, depending upon when they were, depending upon amount of guests, all of those things, the variables are astronomical, and so therefore you tend to get garbage information. That's what I call it. So it's unhelpful, it's confusing, it tends to just convolute everything. So start out and say, okay, this is my wedding, what do I want for my wedding? And start by writing down things that are in matter of importance. So things that you have to have. I have to have my wedding in my church. I have to have my wedding at Hotel XYZ. I have to have a designer gown. Or I have to have, huge dessert station. All of those things, whatever it is that you want, make sure that you list them all out on paper. And I do recommend writing stuff down. When you don't write stuff down, then you wind up coming back later. If you haven't assigned a value to it, then you're like, oh no, now where are we going to find another $500 or another $1,000? So sit down, you and your fiance, and really talk about it. Before you pick a wedding date, before you pick a wedding vendor, do not pass go. Set a budget, okay? And this has to be liquid money, money that you are prepared to spend, not, oh, I might get a bonus this year for work, or, my dad might, talk to amongst just you and decide what it is you want from your wedding. Then I recommend adding any key decision makers, anyone who's going to give you financial assistance. And I also recommend having that conversation regardless. If you have parents, some people do and some people don't, or you have grandparents, people that are going to actually help you with your wedding. You need to have a sit-down conversation with them and say, very frankly and very honestly, say, Mom and Dad, what are you prepared to give towards our wedding? And just have it a very open communication, not awkward and not, like you're trying to buy a car and strange. So that that, let's say, this is just for examples. Your contribution, it's hard to say, bride and groom, let's say you're giving $30,000. And you went to your parents' bride and you went to them and they said, we can give you $15,000. So you're at $45,000. Let's say the groom's parents said, we can give you $3,000. And, obviously, thank you very much for, giving anything to our wedding. But that's your number. And that is really what you need to start with. That is your budget. That needs to happen first, okay? So establish who's donating, or I shouldn't say donate. It's kind of like donating. Who's contributing to the wedding? And basically, I'm going to call those, because I have a corporate project management background, key stakeholders, right? Because they're invested in your wedding. So we're going to manage, your wedding very similar to a project, and it is. It's a big project. It's a big party. It's lots of money that you're going to be spending, regardless of your budget. It still is a lot of money. So I get all the key stakeholders involved, sit down, have that conversation before, so that you're not picking out things that you can't afford later, because that's going to be a whole separate blog post as far as having realistic expectations as to design. But for today, just establishing your budget. The next step in establishing your budget, like I said, after you should already have your list, right, of all the things that you indicated that you wanted to have. then you should have a backup list, a B list, of things that you would like to have. Not the Earth's not going to, stop rotating and all these things if you don't have that. But, your key things are you have your ceremony site, your reception site, you have food, and you have drink for your guest. You have a dress, he has a tux or a suit, you have a marriage license. Those are things that you have to have. And generally a bouquet of some sort, but we can, again, talk about the design side. That's a whole separate blog post. So just basically establishing your budget at this point. Everyone always comes to me and they say, Lacy, what is the key to my budget? How can I have a wedding of my dreams in my budget? And I wish that I had an answer for you, because trust me, I wouldn't be a wedding planner. I would be a magician, or I would be a millionaire, right? So basically there is no silver bullet, okay? Your budget is driven by, quite simply, your guest count, okay? And I know that this sounds like guest count. Well, I'm heading, and wherever you're watching this video blog from, the coasts tend to have different guest ceremony size than the Midwest does. Here in St. Louis, our average is about 250 to 300 guests. I know, yes. I know it's a lot. So if you take that same budget and you divide it by, let's just say, 200 people, it's not going to go as far as it would, let's say, if you had 120 people or you had 80 people. So what I tell people is get control of your guest count, again, before you've selected a venue, any of that stuff, because if you select a venue that is too small for your guest list later, it's going to be not a good situation, and vice versa. If you selected this huge space that's cavernous, and it's going to swallow up your guest list. So do the homework up front. Do the guest list, and when I say guest list, I mean you don't need at this point in time when you're establishing a budget. You don't need like addresses, although that would be nice, but you don't need that. Really, you just need to know how many people, and that's where you start sitting down saying Aunt Sally and Uncle, Bill, and neighbor Tommy and his wife, and that kind of stuff. That's where you start listing it all out. And then you take that number and really, sorry about that, not good to have a cell phone on during a video blog. Let me turn that off. Sorry, but so when you're establishing your budget and your guest list, that's really where you're going to look hard and fast at your numbers. So I tell people, here's a really great analogy. If you take, let's just say, 4 people out to dinner on you, and you take them and you're going to give them, some appetizers, and you're going to give them an entree, and let's say you give them a dessert and a few cocktails. And then you're going to tip people, and you're going to have to pay tax, because the government wants their money. What do you think you're going to be paying? And so it's really no different with a wedding. And I know that everybody thinks, for whatever reason, that wedding caterers and things should be inexpensive. Not the case. So don't get sticker shock, and have an unrealistic budget for food and beverage. So identify the budget up front, just as far as like what you have to spend. And always my recommendation is scale your guest list back. Let's say you averaged it. Let's say you had 200 guests and you had $40,000. The guests that you're inviting, you're going to love this. Unless you like them enough to go up to them and hand them 2 $100 bills, think about inviting them to your wedding. Because ultimately, that's what happens is people start, and they're excited, and your family's excited, and they want to invite everybody who's ever known you since you were like a little kid. And then all of a sudden your budget's $100,000, and you don't know where you're going to come up with this money. So really, sit down and talk about your guest list. And I know that sometimes it's hard. It really is. I mean, I was married too, so I completely understand. Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions that if you only want to have 100 guests, and that's what you can afford, then that's what you need to have. And know that it's okay if you want to deal in quality and not in the quantity and things like that. But ultimately, that's up to whomever the stakeholders. Back to what we said, and that's kind of a little bit of negotiation, give and take there. So actually, budget. I kind of oversimplified into thinking that I could get this into one blog post. I think it probably should be 2, because really the preliminary budget is just talking about, you know, things to do, but let's just recap what not to do. Don't choose a wedding date. Don't choose a venue. Don't do anything until you have identified exactly how much money you are prepared to spend, how much money your family is prepared to contribute. Then, next step, of course, I'm going to put a plug in here, and it's not self-serving. It's our highest recommendation. Get a wedding planner. A good wedding planner will help that budget be organized, and it will help you, because most of you have not planned a wedding before in your market or wherever it is that you're trying to plan a wedding, and it's probably been a while since your parents have done so. Wedding planners, we do this every day. Well, good wedding planners, professional wedding planners, I should say, do this every day, and we know what things cost, and we could sit down with you, and we could say, Sally and Jimmy, you want to have this wedding, and you want to have appetizers, and you want to have open bar, and signature cocktails, and all of these things. You're probably looking at X for this venue. And we can actually help you kind of estimate what each of the venues is going to cost. And then, so you kind of have done your preliminary, up front, kind of like buying a car or a house. You will have done research before you get there, and that's what a wedding planner does. We know all the costs that are associated with individual venues, the challenges that go there that might add on to the budget. So get a budget, get a wedding planner, pick a date, pick a venue, and be flexible with your date. That's probably a whole separate issue, but I don't want to go too long because I know that you guys are watching this either at work or whatnot, and I don't want to bore you. And obviously, I don't want to give away all of my trade secrets, or you wouldn't need me, would you? But because I feel so strongly about the misconception around budgets and the order of things, don't get a venue and then decide on what your budget is. That's ridiculous. You wouldn't just go buy a house and not have any clue how you're going to afford the monthly payment, would you? So do that, and then get a wedding planner. They will help you through the waters and through the maze that is wedding planning. Of course, I'm not taking anything away from anybody else, but you could read message boards all day long for the rest of time, and everybody's going to have an opinion. None of those are your wedding. Focused on your variables. Focus on your stakeholders, all the things that I talked about. So stay off the message boards. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Focus on what you're doing. Get a wedding planner who's on your side, who's your advocate, and I promise you this will be fun. So till next time, in our next video blog, we're going to talk about, I think there's a couple of things that we could talk about. I'm not exactly sure which one we're going to or not. But probably we're going to talk about selecting a venue and the next steps in your planning process. So stay tuned. As we said, this is going to go on Mondays and Wednesdays for now. There may be a random one thrown in here or there if the rest of the LBE team feels so inclined. So we just appreciate you so much. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Bye.